Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and as you can tell by this immaculate little setup here, first of all, yes, I do use a lot of Splatoon 3 resources. But second of all, we are here to discuss the Fire Elemental Signature Arcana for our Signature Arcana tier list ranking. Oh yeah, you thought I was never going to do it, didn't you? Admit it, you knew what I was thinking. Or you thought you knew what I was thinking. But you were wrong, weren't you? Anyway, my own gloating aside, this is where we're going to start going over my personal feeling for the Fire Arcana Fire Arcana signature, Fire Elemental signature Arcana. No, I'm not editing that out. And going over them based upon their strength, their usefulness, their ease of use, and then whatever other properties they may have that give them, more or fewer marks. And I'd like to point out that I'm also going to be looking at them in both of their modes. For those of you who are unaware, or for those of you who just may have had a momentary lapse in judgment, a Signature Arcana already starts enhanced. Because what every Signature Arcana is basically a standard Arcana that's been bumped up. It's like your personal signature move, so to speak. So, in comparison to what you normally have, like we'll look at Dynamic Disarray real quick, you can see that its description is release a shower of sparks that bounce off any enemies they strike. And then there is another grayed out part that reads what happens when it's enhanced. In this case, increases the number of sparks stored. Well, a Signature Arcana doesn't have that part grayed out. It will always be enhanced. And then its other mode, outside of being enhanced, is the Signature cast that you get when you fill up your Signature gauge, which is the blue gauge that happens underneath your... not happens, but the blue gauge that is underneath your HP bar. And when that gauge gets filled up, so as you see, you land attacks to fill it up. But in a training room, that would take all day. So you just pick up one of these and boom, it's enhanced. So I'll be going over every Arcana, both in its, regular / enhanced state, and then its signature cast, and we'll be going over how each of those really compares. Mostly to each other, but you get the idea. Now, this is, of course, all my opinion. That does, of course, mean it's the right opinion, but it also means that if you want to have a discussion about it, first of all, keep it civil in the comments, as I always say. But second of all, if you have a reason why you think something should be higher or lower on the list, by all means, bring it up, because there's always the chance that there's something that I've forgotten. Alright, I think we're all set, so let's go ahead and start our tier list adventure. And we will do so by going over Blazing. I'm going to go over them more or less in order of how they appear on here. But just understand that there's no real reason to go in any particular order outside of if something catches my attention between one or another. So let's start with Blazing Blitz. So I will give points to Blazing Blitz. It is one of the thematically coolest Arcana in the game. You just dash up to someone, beat the snot out of them, and then knock them away with one final hit for 50. So as you can see in this instance, it did 102. But its normal damage output is 100, so we just got one happy critical hit there. So, I know what you're saying, Dark Sage, that's a lot of damage for one Arcana. And yeah, it is. But keep in mind, that's divided out over a number of hits, so if you were to put on something that, let's say, boosts your power by, 8%. Now, we would expect just the total number would be boosted by 8%, you'd do 108 damage. But as you can see, we did 114, and that's because all of those separate little hits all got boosted too, so it's not like it just boosts the overall end number. So it's pretty good for something that works off of a power scale. It works well with say the Dark Katana melee build just because of how many hits it does. Like, there's very good numerical reasons why this Arcana would be good. Let's also look at the signature cast. There you go. Again, that's a big number. 225 is no small number. And the other thing that's really nice about this is that, pardon me while I shifted my chair, is that Blazing Blitz, when you signature cast it, it just doesn't hold you still as long as the basic cast does. Now, as far as some of its other stats, it has a 6 second cooldown starting from the moment you use it, so it's not from the moment it does its damage, it's just starting here 6 seconds. Now, I want to very carefully look to make sure that's 6 seconds. Yep. Alright, so my thoughts on Blazing Blitz. This one is difficult to use. Like, really difficult to use. Mostly because... Now, this is coming from the standpoint of someone who plays on the... or who plays with the retro floor plan active most of the time. It's really hard to just sit and focus down on one enemy, like, for that long. And... thing is, if enemies are overlapping, it will hit them as well. But it's really hard to get a series of enemies overlapping to the point where you're actually hitting them. So they're not necessarily going to stay in... They're not necessarily going to all be in hit stun when you go to use your attacks. Now, the signature cast is better about that. And it's hard to ignore the damage numbers, but my issue with this one is that when you're using it, you're really putting yourself in a heavy commitment. Like, having to stand still for that many frames to get things done, like, you will be being targeted while you're doing this. And, of course, the obvious solution is, well, why don't you just take a bunch of crowd control with you, Darksage? That's a good idea, but even crowd control doesn't last forever. But it does make this more viable, let's be fair. And for that amount of damage from one spell, it might be tempting to try it. All I'm gonna say is that situations aren't always as clear-cut as you would think. So for that reason, because it's really hard to use in a crowd scenario, but it is really good against single target, I'm personally just gonna put it here. I think it's below average just because it holds you still for so long. Now, if you miss, you just dash and you do nothing, your spell farts out, and that's it. But if you hit, well, again, you're really committed to that spell at that point. So you can very easily be snuck up on. And these enemies do not care about that little honor system of, oh, hold on, he's performing a combo, let's wait. No, they will hit you in the back. They'll hit you in the back, and they will not feel bad about it. And if they're a rogue, they might even get a critical hit for doing that. And no one wants that, so that's where I'm putting that one. And now, on a similar vein, let's look at Heroic Blaze. Now, this spell is a jump arcana, and traditionally, allow me to explain. There's two types of jump arcana. The ones that have you jumping forward, or, moving, and then the ones that, for some reason, think it's a good idea to hold you still. Now, this one has benefit of crowd control, and also does good damage. Here's the problem with that. First of all, this crowd control is somewhat based on being able to burn your enemy, so it won't do as much damage against Zeal or her mooks. B, you're getting that 20% damage penalty against using a fire element attack against the same type of elemental enemy. And third, remember what I said. When you're using this, like from the moment you press that B button, you're not going anywhere. Now, this works great with certain combos, like say Tearing Whirlwind, or other movement-based spells that kind of drag enemies together. But the problem is, when you don't have those spells, this really does a bad job of keeping you safe, because, yeah, you're invulnerable to enemy attack while you're in the air, but there's lots of enemies that aren't necessarily going to be within your range when you go to use this spell. Mages, archers, summoners, lancers. Trying to get all of these enemies together requires crowd control, because otherwise you're just a sitting duck, and the moment you land, you will be getting a spear placed squarely in your rectum. I don't know if you know this, but spears and rectums don't go together very well. It's a very painful combination. Oh, but what about the signature cast? Well, let's look at it. There's the thing, it's a very long-lasting combo. It doesn't do quite as much damage as Blazing Blitz. And it has the sheer audacity to hold you in the air even longer than Blazing Blitz holds you still. So this has two major negative sides. One, it's allowing enemies a lot of time to line up and get ready to punish you for your bad decisions. And two, against bosses, you're probably not going to get the whole signature cast out before they break out of their stun state, which is particularly dangerous if you're up against bosses that can really pelt you for a lot of damage, like, you know, either version of Sura, Phase 2 or Phase 3. You get comboed really hard by Zeal. The others not so much, except for Shu, who is just a beast. The fact of the matter is, this really requires like a lot of commitment, and you know, do you really want to have to put a ring on your spell every time you go to cast it? That just seems really selfish. On the spell's behalf, not yours. Obviously, you're the one giving out rings, and you're giving it out to ideas and inanimate objects, so you're very generous. But the spell, not so much. And also, just to make sure we clock it, so this has a cooldown of about 6.5 seconds. So on a 60 frame per second game, that's a lot of cooldown. But that's the whole point. Your standard and signature spells have cooldowns to make your basics stand out. But we're not here to talk game design, we're here to talk signature Arcana. And this one, to me, really just eats up a lot. Like, you have to go through a lot of effort to make Heroic Blaze work. And then even when you do get it to work, there's no guarantee that it's going to work flawlessly. Like, every time you cast this spell, you run the risk of something staying just outside of the range of your flaming circle and then just smacking your face in as soon as you land. Is that really what you want out of your Arcana? One that puts you in more danger than when you started? I don't think so. One last thing before we call this good. Now, some signature jump Arcanas that, don't let you move from a standard cast will let you move when you signature cast. So let's see if Heroic Blaze is one of those. No. No, you are stuck in place the entire time you use this. And you can't even cancel out of it if you use it and then go, oh crap, I made a mistake! Well, too bad, you're not doing anything until you land. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know that there are people out there that really like Heroic Blaze. Me? No, I'm sorry. It goes right there. And if you are a Heroic Blaze enjoyer, by all means, let me know what your thoughts are on this one. I can't. I can't with that spell. I'm sorry, that one's awful. At least in my opinion. But I mean, if you think differently, let me know. So let's move on to Flame Breath. Flame Breath is a melee spell that flat out says blast away enemies with a breath of fire. So you're literally a Capcom RPG series. Its enhancement ignites all enemies that it hits. So there you go. Each regular hit does 20. And you can get up to 3 of them for a total of 74 damage. I'm assuming that's just because that first tick of burn is resetting with every hit, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, I mean, that's 7 ticks, it's 2 damage. But if you only hit with, say, the 3rd hit, let's go back here. You're getting 34, so it's 7 ticks either way, but it comes out differently, so... Well, no, it doesn't. I'm thinking about this, and no, it's 7 ticks of burn damage every time, so long as your enemy is somewhat vulnerable to fire, you'll get those 7 ticks. See, this one comes out quickly, it doesn't last very long. Now, you can't necessarily dash cancel out of it, but it's not a huge commitment anyway, and normally if you're using this, it's because someone is in your face and you're saying, hey, get out of my bubble. Now, for how quick it comes out, and the idea that it's not holding you still very much, its regular cast actually is kind of nice. Plus, it does count as melee, so this works very well with Dark Katana synergy. Now, what does it look like when you signature cast it? It looks like that. Now, this can really add up some damage if you just hold it on an enemy. 186, so it's not as much as Blazing Blitz, but it's also got more range. And you can re-aim the Flame Breath while you're using it, so you're not necessarily getting surprised because you can start up here and go, oh hey, no, you guys down there get out of my way. So you can spread that around and keep yourself much safer than you could with the previous 2 spells. And here's my thing. I really like the regular version of Flame Breath just because it's a really fast burst damage option. The signature cast is more of a sustained damage option, which is great against bosses, and even though you can swivel your Flame Breath around, there's issues getting it to work against regular mooks, namely mages, archers, and summoners. Because, keep in mind, from this range, you can still hit one enemy, so there's a good chance you can hit lancers before they can poke you. So, for those reasons that I've detailed, oh, and its cooldown, wow, it's actually pretty quick. It's like, what, 4.5 seconds? Yeah, it's 4.5. It's actually not bad. I'm gonna put this, I'm gonna say high B for Flame Breath. I think it's strong enough and versatile enough to work. There's just other options that are better than it for various reasons. But I think it's just fine. Oh, and because of how it works, I don't know if this is a thing or not, so don't quote me. Like, I don't know this as well as I know it for other spells, but I think this can block projectiles if you time it right. I think. I don't know. So someone verify that for me in the comments if you could, please. And we're going to move on from Flame Breath to... what's the next logical choice? How about Homing Flares? Yeah, Homing Flares. So this one counts as projectile, actually. So this works in tandem with things like the Chaos Scanner and the Gloves of Gambit. Now when you use it, it summons a series of flares around you that just dart off to hit enemies. This one is against a single enemy. It doesn't do too bad. So roughly about 70 damage, give or take a few. Yeah, 70 damage if they all connect with one enemy. Here's the thing though, they're all going to scatter out to hit their own enemy because depending on where they are in relation to where your enemies are, they're going to go after different things. And yes, they can trample over enemies, so it's a decent crowd control. Not necessarily great for damage on its regular cast. But at a 5-second cooldown, it's not bad. So what does it look like when you signature cast it? Oh, first of all, you get roughly 4 times the homing flares. But again, this is much better used against a singular target. Like, let's show that off out here. We'll use it against Big Boss Dummy. So, as you noticed, even against this dummy, it didn't necessarily last long enough to get off the whole spell. Maybe if we don't hit him with Bolt Rail first? But yeah, if you have good enough stun values, you can get off quite a bit of damage against a boss. Yeah, you're looking at roughly between 210 and 212 damage if they all hit. But yeah, to be fair, this is more of a crowd control option against regular enemies. And let's be fair, it's not the greatest crowd control option unless you're signature casting. So if you're going to use homing flares, I recommend using it with a signature spam build. Like, seriously, just go, like, start with Family Seal and then the... what is it, Fury Robe? It's the orange one. Yep, Fury, or as I like to call it, the Goku Robe. As far as where I would place homing flares, I think it's worse than Flame Breath, but better than Blazing Blitz. So we're putting it there. There might be a number of you that disagree with me, so again, just let me know in the comments why you disagree, and we'll have a discussion about it. Simple as that. Alright, so next we're going to look at Raging Inferno. I'm trying to kind of go in rough order of where I used them when I was showcasing them. So there we go. So Raging Inferno, it is a charge Arcana that you throw it out, and then the first thing it hits, it becomes a vacuum and just becomes a swirling eddy of flame and pain. Like, the spell looks really cool. I can't deny that. And it leaves enemies burned. Alright, so its total damage if you don't score any critical hits is 126. That is, of course, because you'll get 7 ticks of burn damage, and then the last hit does 22. All the others do 10. Simple math. So, the cooldown is about 5.5 seconds, and it starts the moment you throw your Raging Inferno. Now, because it's a charge Arcana, it inherently has some benefits. It has some versatility benefits that others don't. Like if you see trouble coming at you and you don't have time to finish charging, you can still just let out the spell without finishing the charge. And that, of course, it's good to be able to cancel out of that option, just because you don't want to put yourself in a bad scenario. Now, you can't dash cancel out of it once you start charging it, so you're either throwing it or you're getting hit with something and canceling the spell entirely while taking some damage. So, if you find yourself in a bad spot and you need to throw the spell early, by all means do that and then dash out of the way. Now, as you can see, this is a perfectly fine spell for crowd control. Like, the thing is, when it comes to combos that involve this spell, like, especially if you're going to use it against, like, a boss or a bigger target, you might want to lead with this because it's hard to continue a combo against a boss when you throw this at the end. There's nothing saying you can't, I'm just saying lead with this if you can, If you can't, you're still getting a decent amount of damage out of it. So what does the signature cast look like? Signature cast is pretty nice, but it only does about 50 more damage than the regular cast. Which means this isn't necessarily something that you're using because it's going to do great in boss battles. Now, you can't really... you can't build up any more power by holding it. This just is there to give you a better sense of aim. And as you can see, against the smaller targets, it doesn't even necessarily get up to 170. It does that against apparently a single target because they want me to be crazy. Yeah, 158. How did I get 170 before? Was that a bunch of critical hits? God, that was a bunch of critical hits. Oh my god. So, So, its base damage is, after all hits included, about 158. Honestly, this is not something that you're taking to deal with bosses. You're taking it to deal with mooks. And on with retro floor plan active, sometimes you need that ability to handle mooks. Then, against bosses, what you're hoping for is to catch them as their stun time is beginning, and then maybe get lucky enough to get another signature and throw it at them as they're coming out of their stun, just for extra damage. This one, because it's better against regular enemies than it is against bosses, it's a toss-up for me where it goes. I'm gonna say it's better than homing flares, not better than flame breath. Like, it's still in that B-tier category. It's just, it's like, that's just where it's where it is. It's average. Which, that's not necessarily a bad place to be, let's be fair. But that's all I can give it, is average. So what about Inferno Beam? That's another one that works very well against mooks. And that's why. It sweeps across enemies, it gets a decent amount of damage per hit, like 22 per hit. Which, because of how it works, it can score 2 hits, so... And you can dash cancel out of it, although I think towards the beginning you actually can't, so let me test that. And now towards the middle or the end of the cast. Okay, so yes, Inferno Beam, you can dash cancel out of its regular cast just fine. You are not being held still while you're casting. But let's see if that holds true with the signature cast. Well, I mean, you give up your signature, but... Now, the bonus being, of course, if you let it go, you get the big mega beams at the end, which don't go out as far. But again, you want those to kind of target the main target, really hit them hard. Now, it hits in a wide range, but its damage against a single target is a bit inconsistent. On top of that, most bosses, if you use the signature cast against them, are going to break out of their stun before the spell finishes, so my recommendation, go until you get the big beams and then dash cancel it and combo with something else while you have a moment. You'll probably only be able to get one spell, but it's better than being held still for the entire duration of it. So, now that we know... Oh, and its cooldown, about 5.5 seconds, so a little above average. So where do we put Inferno Beam? It's kind of on the same rating as Raging Inferno. I like that Inferno Beam lets you dash cancel out of it if you're in trouble. I don't like that it doesn't do as much damage as Raging Inferno. I think they're in about the same spot, so I'm just going to put it here. So we got a lot of average stuff, which that makes sense, doesn't it? Not everything can be completely goated or a complete failure. Some things have to sit in the middle. Alright, so now that we've gotten those out of the way, we're halfway done, by the way, aren't we special? Let's look at Crashing Meteor. Crashing Meteor, at one point or another in the game's history, had the distinction of being the spell with the highest single-hit damage. So a great burst damage option. Now, they took that away at the Phantom update and made it so that it drops a bunch of comets ahead of itself before the big boy hits. But now the big boy doesn't hit for as much damage. Like, I still say it's a good power option just because a single hit for 60 damage is so meaningful. It's just no longer pulling in as impressive of numbers. But the comets also make it easier to catch enemies. And you can catch multiple enemies in the comet shower. You know, it sets them up to get hit by the big boy. So if we look at its total damage, and the cooldown is 6 seconds, so it's got kind of a high cooldown. About 84 damage, so it's not hitting Blazing Blitz numbers, but it's doing good. Make no mistake, and as you start to get more damage, those 4s will become 5s and 6s. That 60 will start to become something much greater. Like, if you just have a 10% boost, all those 4s become 5s, and then that 60 becomes a 66, so you're getting plenty of potential out of this spell. So let's look at its signature. How does its signature work? So it's big and flashy, don't get me wrong. But a lot of the damage that you can do to bosses is based upon luck. Like, are you hitting any overlap in between the meteors? Is the knockback hitting them in such a way that they're getting pushed into the area of effect of another meteor? Like, it's really hard to say what your damage potential is on this. But if we just use the dummy over here to our left, again, you can see we're hitting wildly different numbers. Like, that time hit for 88, but if we do it this time, it hit for 156. So the damage varies wildly. And I think it's pretty clear to say that Crashing Meteor is a spell that was designed to clear rooms, not necessarily bosses. But its regular cast does good single enemy damage, so you're kind of somewhere in the middle on that. Like, it's hard to really say because the damage can be so inconsistent. But if you're asking me where I think Crashing Meteor goes, I think you've got edge of A, like high B. Like, yeah, see, Cecil wants to chime in. He has some things to say. He knows a lot about crashing meteors. Or at least he thinks he does. But yeah, I think just because of how erratic its signature cast is, and don't get me wrong, it's a big, flashy signature cast that also has high scaling for just damage up, but it's really hard to get it to land properly. It also counts as nothing, not melee, not projectile, not summon. It's just a thing. Same with Inferno Beam. Raging Inferno is a projectile. And did we go over the others already? It's melee, that's melee, and movement, by the way. That's melee, movement, and jump. But you get the idea. So let's move on to Exploding Fireball. Exploding Fireball is one of the earliest Arcana that you get. Like, it comes out so fast that there's almost no point in dash canceling it. And it's got a cooldown of 5 seconds and a huge area of effect. Like, as you can see, fire a massive fireball that explodes on impact. When it's enhanced, it increases the blast radius. Now, it doesn't leave anyone burning, but as you can see, we're not having any trouble hitting all 4 of the dummies to our right. And again, just a big, quick 50 damage hit at range like that, it can be really, really impactful. The problem is that this spell also has issues with getting caught on objects. Like, as you can see, it explodes on impact. Problem is, that's impact with anything. So even if you're aiming, let's just say, slightly up. Let's use the mouse to aim this one, actually. Oh, I can't. Yeah, we get the idea. Yeah, because even if you aim just slightly up, you will hit the wall. And it will do nothing. Now, in exchange for something that hits at very long range for a pretty decent amount of damage, I say it's worth it, you just have to be careful where you're casting it. But this is a very simple Arcana. Kind of what you see is what you get with this one. Now, its signature is a triple fireball. And as you can see, its knockback isn't nearly as good, at least not until the third fireball, which also lands to enemies being on fire. So it's a total of 178, and it's 178 at range, which I really like. And of course, that's going to go very well with, say, like the firecracker that makes burn damage last longer, or just something that improves your overall damage again, even if you only have 10% damage up, that's going from hitting 50s to 55s. And let's not forget that last fireball does 54, so at 10%, you're probably hitting 60. Well, we can math that out. So you're adding 5.4, so you're hitting 59.4. That's still pretty good. But yeah, between its range, its area of effect, and the idea that you can put that explodes on impact effect to your advantage to block projectiles, I mean, it's not the ideal use for Exploding Fireball, but I would say we can put that in A rank. Exploding Fireball is good stuff. It's nearly a staple in some of my power builds just because it comes with both range and, of course, power, and high potential. I see nothing wrong with Exploding Fireball aside from the fact that it will get caught on very small things. Like any small destructible object, it will detonate on impact with. So be wary, be careful, because otherwise your Exploding Fireball is just going to blow up in your face. Let's move on from Exploding Fireball. Why don't we talk about Flame Cleaver? That's a good one. Flame Cleaver. This one I've been using as a staple to my high tempo builds, and that is because it's just a simple long range projectile that inflicts burn every time it hits something, but you get 2 of them. And its base damage is 16, but with burn you're hitting 30. Now, I don't recommend just letting the burns expire before you throw the second one if you really need to keep enemies off you. Just throw both of them. That's the whole point, is that it can be used for very effective crowd control. it pierces through enemies, and hey, if you guys didn't know this, it also pierces through projectiles. So it's both crowd control and defense, which is amazing. And you get 2 of them, which also means that it synergizes very well with Ring of Reserves. It's got okay potential, and its signature cast is pretty goated. Have a look at this. There you go, and just at range, just casting casually, we're hitting like 150s, 157s. That dude on the very edge of our range took 90, so 137. Like, that's the thing, the amount of damage is, again, a little inconsistent, like with Crashing Meteor, but I'd say it's still more consistent, and you're hitting at a... Yeah, against runes, you're hitting at a 170-degree angle, 175-degree angle, nearly a semicircle. Like, it's enough to really catch enemies out and stop them in their tracks from doing something really dangerous, like throwing a toxic bola. And obviously, because of how easily spammable these guys are, pardon me. Because of how easily spammable they are, you can throw 2 of them at a boss, then continue comboing, and then if you get your signature, which is not that unlikely, then you can throw the signature cast at them again while they're still stunned, if you're fast enough. Like, this is one of those high skill ceiling spells that takes a little bit to really come to grips with. Once you do, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. But I do have to dock it points for the inconsistency of its damage on signature cast, and it does have kind of an annoying cooldown. So for that reason, I'm putting it in high A. Like, it's almost S tier. Its defense is S tier worthy. There's just a couple of things holding it back from awesomeness. So, let's continue on that path of awesomeness and move on to Dragon Arc, shall we? Dragon Arc. This is another one of the earliest spells in the game. You can see by the number of charges that it gets. Oh, I forgot to check something with Flame Cleaver. Hold on, I want to see if you can... Well, again, it happens so fast that there's no real need to dash cancel out of it. So technically you can't dash cancel out of it, but I mean, there's only a few frames, perfect. A few frames where the spell is actually active. So, or rather where the casting part of it is actually active. So I would say it's nothing that needs to be worried about. Alright, back to Dragon Arc, which I can confidently say, yeah, you can dash cancel out of Dragon Arc. And then the beauty is, because it's a multi-charge spell, you can save those charges for later. And even cast them in a different direction if you want to. Again, versatility is the name of the game, and I would argue that Dragon Arc, at least as far as being able to cast it in different directions and being able to do crowd control, it's even more versatile than Flame Cleaver. Its defense isn't as good, but it does pierce enemies pretty effectively. And for good damage, as you can see. I'm trying to hit with just one. Okay, so they all do 8 damage apiece, so if you can find a way to hit the enemy with all 8 of them, you're doing 80. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, though, so I would, because of how far out they spread when you cast the spell. So don't expect to hit with all 8 of them against a single target, unless it's a beefy target. But we can of course test this against Big Boy Dummy. Hit him for 72. 6-hit combo. So if you cast it right up against him, you can probably get him. Well, that time it was just 8. 7. 6. 5. Okay. But yeah, you get the idea. Don't expect to hit with all of them against a single target. And that holds even more so true for the signature cast, which just goes nuts. And you can re-aim it while you're attacking, so yes, it does good crowd control and good single target damage. This is one that I would recommend using on a critical hit build. Now, of course, it counts as projectile, so there aren't as many things that synergize with projectiles on critical hit. But that doesn't mean you can't make it work. And again, this thing has range and it has piercing. You can dash cancel out of it. Like, this is a very good spell. But I do have to acknowledge the inconsistency. So I think this one sits at the very, very tippy top of the A rank. It's really good. Really, really good. That's about all I have to say about Dragon Arc, so how's about we look at Blazing Lariat, the Flame Whip. This was one of my favorite spells in the early days of Wizard of Legend, and it's still good now. It scores multiple hits, it's a movement spell, so you move when you cast it, of course. It hits all around you in a big wide circle. It leaves enemies burned. Like, there's very little I can say about Blazing Lariat that isn't good. Like, you can even dash cancel out of it. Look at that. Like, I'm trying to time it so that the first one hits, but the second one hasn't come out yet. Yeah, you can just dash cancel out of it. That's really nice. Now, its signature cast is the same thing on steroids. Use it against a single target here. Every hit does 26, leaves them burned. Yeah, 222 damage against a single target. And of course, that implies that you hit with everything near the epicenter of the Blazing Lariat. Which, you know, it's not super consistent, but it's consistent enough that you're constantly hitting high damage numbers. There you go, 232 against Boss Dummy. And we've got a very excited Cecil Bird. 168 against Boss Dummy there. 210. Like, the damage is very good. Like, this is one of the highest damage signature spells, and it does a lot. Like, it's very versatile. Its cooldown is about 5.5, so, you know, there's that to think about. Now, a little bit of history with this spell. This spell, at one point or another, was a spell that was very badly affected by how the game was coded, meaning that if you cast it near a pit, it could actually send you sailing off the pit. So you would just take, essentially, a free 25 damage just for trying to use your spells. So at one point or another, this would have been one of the worst spells in the game. But with the way that it works now, its damage potential, its movement, its wide circular, like, hits, this is easily one of the best signatures around. Definitely worth it. It's good on power builds. It hits multiple times, so it can work out well for critical builds, especially since it counts as melee. Like, that spell really is the full package. which only leaves one spell, and those of you who have been with my channel for a while already know what I'm going to say about Tracer Barrage. Now, Tracer Barrage is Fiery Yo-Yo, but really big. It's Fiery Yo-Yo, but big. And it has many of the same benefits, like it hitting enemies on the way back. Like, as you can see, we're hitting for a pretty casual 91 against this dude. And if I cast it from back here, 83, but some of those were criticals. But because they pierce through enemies, you can do that to an entire line of mooks. Like that. And the one that took the least damage took 49. 52 in this case. You see what I'm saying? With each like fiery bola doing 7 damage, it's not hard to see how this spell can rack up damage fast. Now, here's another fun thing about this spell. If you cast it and then start moving in a different direction, the fireballs will all follow you. So you can use that boomerang effect to your advantage and curve them to hit something else on the way back. Now, the one negative, you can't dash cancel out of it. Like, I'm going to cast it and start mashing the dash button. And there you go, I was only able to dash once the casting animation was done. Now, considering its range, though, and the idea that it can cause a lot of hit stun just because it throws out so many fireballs, I would hardly call that an issue. And the signature cast is the exact same thing, just with even more fireballs. Like, again, the dude at the end took 49, but the others took so much more damage. Like, that one took 199. Like, the amount of damage you can do with Tracer Barrage is just incredible. And kablamski. Yeah, 241 against the big boy dummy. Like, I have nothing bad to say about Tracer Barrage other than you can't dash cancel out of it. And in my opinion, Tracer Barrage is easily one of the best signature spells in the game. Not just of the fire element, but of the entire game. And it would be criminal not to put it in S tier. Absolutely criminal. But that is our ranking for the first part of the Signature Arcana spell series. So, or Spotlight series, I should say. Do you guys agree with the list? Do you think that these spells are good where they are? Do you think something should move up? Do you think something should move down? Should we harass Heroic Blaze even more than we already have? You guys let me know in the comments below. I, of course, want to thank you for coming and spending a good chunk of your free time here with me today. Going through 12 spells, taking almost an hour. It's no small feat, but I do appreciate you guys sticking around with me. And this is precisely why I wanted to break it up by element. Because with every element having at least 12 spells, like, the only difference maker might be the chaos spells, but cross that bridge when we get to it. Yeah, with every element having 12 spells, these tier list parts are going to take a little bit, so thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for coming and checking out my work. I very much appreciate it. I hope you're all doing fantastically on this lovely day that we're having, and I hope to see you in the next one. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and you take care, everybody.